Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. So last week I did the craziest stream of my life where I played the Yu-Gi-Oh! Early Days collection until I completed all 13 English games. That stream ended up being 129 hours. Tomorrow I will be uploading a video documenting my journey throughout that 129-hour stream, but in this video I wanted to make more of a consolidated I think that's the word, review of the Early Days collection, because I actually have not really given my formal thoughts on this collection since I've beaten it last Saturday. So without further ado, here we go. The Early Days collection is a video game compilation that was released only about 2 weeks ago, I think actually 2 Fridays ago, and it contains emulated versions for the first 14 handheld games based on the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, which was released between 98 and 2004, and some of the included games were released for the first time ever in English, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsule. There's 14 games in total. One of them was not translated, which is Duel Monster 6 Expert 2. However, I'm pretty sure that is basically the same game as Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition Stairway to the Destined Duel. So even though Duel Monster 6 was not translated, I think besides some minor changes, it is basically the same game that we got in English, which is Stairway to the Destined Duel. Of the games included, we have Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 2 Dark Duel Stories, Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsule, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories, which is basically Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 3, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 4 Battle of the Great Duelists, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Eternal Duelist Soul, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 6, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Sacred Cards, Yu-Gi-Oh! Reshef of Destruction, Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition Stairway to the Destined Duel, Yu-Gi-Oh! WCT 2004, Yu-Gi-Oh! Destiny Board Traveler, and Yu-Gi-Oh! 7 Trials to Glory. My general thoughts on the Early Days collection was that it was fun, but kind of repetitive, and you have to keep in mind my review of this is, yes, of someone who's clocked in over 100 hours already into the Early Days collection, but it's someone who played all of these games in essentially a single sitting, which is certainly not the way that you should be playing these games. Like, for instance, World Championship Tournament 2004, there's like 5 tiers, and you need to beat all tier 1 opponents 3 times, all tier 2 opponents 5 times, all tier 3 opponents 7 times, eventually all tier 5 opponents 15 times. And like, there is no way that you should do any of that in one single sitting, but of course, that's what I did, which really was not recommended, and I would not recommend that to anyone. So the monotony of these games certainly felt a little more amplified for me because I was not taking breaks really throughout this challenge. That being said, I do feel like the background settings of the emulator itself are really cool. I like that they have different background functions for whatever game you are playing, and I like that you have different filters that you can select through, which also makes the experience feel a little more customizable and a little more fun. One element, though, that I absolutely loved was the fact that you could rewind time. The rewind function literally saved this entire challenge. There were so many times where I would set a monster, my opponent would summon, especially in those early games where it was based on attributes more so than attack and defense. My opponent would summon a fiend monster, and if I had a light monster in my hand that I didn't play, I would rewind, set the light monster, my opponent would then summon the fiend monster still, and their fiend monster would be destroyed because light is super effective to fiend. So the rewind function, or if you make like a minor misplay and end your turn instead of going into the battle phase, which will happen, it just does happen when you're trying to speed through these duels, and even if you're not, mistakes happen. The ability to rewind up to a minute of gameplay I thought was a really, really welcome addition, and really was a savior for me when it came to doing this challenge. You can also customize your play, meaning you can unlock hidden cards, you can remove like deck capacity and duelist level. This was something I actually never did outside of using one single code to get the Winged Dragon of Ra Phoenix form, I believe it was, in Reshef, because Reshef was was absolutely ridiculous. That was the only code that I used, but the codes certainly will make titles easier, especially a title like Reshef, which I played for the first time, and my lord, that game was nightmarishly difficult. People were not overstating how difficult that game was. But with that element and with the rewind function, it certainly becomes a little more possible. As for the game selection, the games do kind of feel repetitive at times. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters through Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters 4 are all very similar games. They have a similar UI and a similar structure where you need to beat your opponents 5 times each, and the attributes always are going to take priority over the attack, which was kind of weird to get used to, although I really didn't hate that element. And then Yu-Gi-Oh! The Eternal Duelist Soul, Worldwide Edition, World Championship 2004 and 2005 were all very similar in nature and play as well. But there were some unique titles here. The Sacred Cards and Reshef were very, very fun. Destiny Board Traveler, which I actually didn't get to play, seemed really interesting. And then, of course, Dungeon Dice Monsters was great, and Monster Capsule was a lot of fun as well. One of my biggest complaints with the early days collection is the fact that Konami kind of lied about something major. Even if you go on the Early Days Collection website right now, turn back the clock with the rewind function, or fast forward to watch your strategy unfold at Mach speeds. Well, here's the thing. Besides maybe like 1 or 2 titles, there is no fast forward feature in these games. Even if you look it up online, type in Early Days Collection fast forward, and you can see a bunch of people complaining about this. And I learned that besides the fast forward features that existed in games, like holding down L to speed up the Eternal Duelist Soul, there is no way to fast forward a majority of these games, which I feel like Konami kind of lied a little bit about, and I don't know why they wouldn't have put that in a lot of games. I feel like that was a major thing that was missing. In almost every emulator that I've ever played, fast forward is vital and utilized in order to speed up monotonous gameplay, and when my opponent is taking a turn in Dungeon Dice Monsters, I don't need to sit through it for the 500th time at normal speed. Like, fast forward was advertised, and the fact that we really don't have a fast forward feature in almost all of these games, I can't help but think I was a little ripped off in buying this product with the expectation that we would be able to fast forward, which is a basic function that exists in almost any emulator that you download off the internet. So I think that was a total miss. If it's not going to be in the game, don't advertise being able to fast forward at Mach speeds. I mean, that's still on the website, and I just think that that is absolutely ridiculous because it is non-existent in the Early Days Collection. Hopefully it's something they add in later, but I feel like that should have absolutely been something that was on release for all of these games, especially if it was one of the main features that you were advertising. So that is something that I think was a huge miss. Another thing, I would have liked to see maybe more of these games be released with online capabilities. I think it's cool that we do have one in Duel Monsters 4 that has online capabilities, but like Dungeon Dice Monsters, Reshef, Sacred Cards, maybe one of the World Championship tournament games, I think on launch they all should have had online functions. I'm not saying all 14 of these games should have had online capabilities, but I think if 3 or 4 of them did, especially because we know that's something they're interested in because one of them does, I feel like that would have kind of been a happy middle ground. Only having one with online feels a little kind of half-baked, especially because they've said that more should be getting updates in the future, which is great, but I can't help but feel a couple more should have had online functionality at launch. The titles as well, I would have liked to see maybe a couple of console titles. I know they only wanted to stick with handhelds. That was, I guess, the kind of theming that they chose, but I think this collection would have benefited massively from a Duelist of the Roses or Capsule Monster Coliseum type game, which all came out before 2005, so it was in this time zone. I know a lot of people would have loved Forbidden Memories or a game like that, so I feel like maybe the collection of games could have been a little more enticing. But all that said, I'm going to give the Early Days Collection a 6.5 out of 10. It is $50 US currently if you live in America. I'd probably say At 30 or 40, it's probably more worth it, unless they add a fast forward feature to these titles or they add more online capability. But that said, even if you wanted to pay full price for it, I think you could still be getting your money's worth. Sacred Cards and Reshef were a lot of fun, and just seeing how these old Yu-Gi-Oh games operate really is fascinating and a trip down memory lane. And I think there are definitely winners in these 14 games that you can have a lot of fun with. But guys, that is my review on the early days collection. Tune in tomorrow because I will be breaking down my marathon journey on how I beat all 13 English titles within 130 hours in one single stream, and that will be tomorrow. As always, thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this collection down below in the comments, and I hope you have an amazing day. Take care, guys.